witches. If you are new here, hello, my name is Brittany. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite palettes for the winter time. Because if you're anything like me, I always heavily associate my color stories with certain times of the year. And I'm not the only person that does that, because today's video is a collaboration with my friend here on YouTube, Katie Marie. She has been just one of the channels that I've really grown to love this year. And I've been following her, I feel like, for a while now. And I just feel like she produces the type of content that I like to watch. Hence why we're collabing today, because she has been super supportive. You guys have actually seen her and I collab before in a group collab from the shade that made me buy it. But she does a lot of the same type of content that I do and also that I like to consume, as most of these people do that you see me collab with on my channel. But Katie is just such a gem. She's a genuine person and she's just good vibes, man. Like, you guys see her in the live chat. She's down to earth, she's chill, she's genuine. That's just the type of people that I like to follow personally, and I want to share them with you guys. So Katie, thank you so much for collabing with me on this video. I'm super excited to see what your picks are, because I can't wait to see how many green eyeshadows you have in there, because oh my god, the obsession that Katie has with green eyeshadows is so real, and I can't wait to see all of her picks for her winter palette. So I'm just going to dive right in, and I'm actually going to start with one that I just received, so I've never tried this one before. And it's kind of funny that I saw this palette, and I have another palette that I customized and put together for this video. And as soon as I saw this, I'm like, okay, I've never tried it, but I have the Tiny Marvels palette and I absolutely love the formula. This is the Sydney Grace Enduring Love palette, and this is the deep version because there is a light version and a deep version. I chose to get the deep version because I just felt like these tones would be better suited for what I look for. And I love the fact that you have a majority of it is cooler, but you still have like neutrals, a little bit of warmth in there. But the main thing that I love about this palette are the metallics. I think that they're so beautiful. And it's so funny because since I haven't tried this one, I'm not going to say too much about it, but I did customize a little palette from my MakeupGeek Matrix palette. And I put these all together and I'm like, this has a striking resemblance to the Enduring Love. So I wanted to mention these as well. I'll actually put all the names of the shades on the screen for you guys just so you can see which ones I chose. But I love MakeupGeek shadows so much. They're one of my favorite formulas, especially their foiled. But their mattes are incredible. But I just threw this all together and I'm like, I can't mention favorite palettes without talking about MakeupGeek, because I think that if you're really looking to put a palette together, MakeupGeek has a really great website and a matrix system to really just visualize what your palette looks like. I really like how they have their layout set out. And they do have smaller palettes as well, but I have the entire matrix system, so I like to always customize my palettes. So this one I had to mention because I love me some MakeupGeek, and I don't feel like they get nearly the amount of love that they used to. So that is totally a color story that I would just jump for. And then another couple of palettes are from the same brand. I chose both of the Wayne Goss eyeshadow palettes. Imperial Topaz is going to be the more warm, basic, neutral. It's just a basic ass palette, but it's so incredibly nice. I love the formula of these shadows. I love the fact that I could use this one as a face palette as well. This has been just a really great solid palette for me. And the reason that I chose this for wintertime is because I feel like there's usually a lot of holiday parties and stuff like that. So I feel like I would reach for this for the most part in the wintertime. And I also wanted to include the Pearl Moonstone as well, because I just think this is another color story I would be more inclined to use during the wintertime, especially like the blue shade here. It is so incredibly stunning. I love this palette so much, and I love the fact that I could use this as a face highlighter. But this is another one. I'm like, holiday parties, I think I would reach for this because I love just the effect that Wayne Goss's eyeshadows have for me. But the main reason that I chose this palette is for this blue, because it just gives me like the icy vibes. Like, I think frosty, like snowy, all those sorts of things that you associate with the wintertime in upstate New York. This gives that to me, and again, I just think the quality of his palettes are impeccable. So I wanted to mention both of the Wayne Goss palettes because I feel like if I'm going to use them, it's going to be based around like holiday parties and stuff like that, but I could still get down with these on just a regular Tuesday. The next palette, I'm going to pull this one out because of holidays, and this is just Christmas in a palette. This is the Indi Beat Cosmetics Frankincense and Murrh eyeshadow palette, and this was actually sent to me by the brand, and I just see this and I'm like, I just immediately think of Christmas, especially with these glitters. They're so incredibly pretty. I actually did a testing new makeup with this palette. I'll leave a card for that if you guys want to watch that, but I used this palette. I'm like, the mattes weren't my favorite, but the standouts for me in this palette were the glitters, and I'm a fan of pressed glitters as long as they're more finely milled. I like that, and I think that these glitters just heavily reflect Christmas in a palette. So I was really into this. I think for the price point, it's only like a $25 palette. I do feel like the outer packaging though was kind of a missed opportunity because you would never think that this is like a Christmassy palette. You know what I mean? So I just was looking at the color story with this one. I really did enjoy this for the pressed glitters. And then I also have to mention the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette because this one, I love this palette for all year round, but I immediately think of holiday when I see this palette, especially with the reds, the greens, the golds. This just gives me everything. It's got the pop of blue in there, but you still have, you know, your warm tones. I feel like this is like a perfect fall winter palette. One of my favorite palettes in my entire collection, so I can't mention a winter palette / holiday without mentioning this palette here because it's one of the goats in my collection. The next palette I'm going to mention is the Blueberry Muffin palette from BH Cosmetics. I just really gravitate towards blue for this time of the year, and this palette is fantastic. I did have a little bit of a difficulty with the shade here, but I feel like it was because I layered another shadow underneath it, whereas I feel like if I went in with that first, it would have been okay. But this palette, for what, $18 is incredible. And if you see some of the swatches on this, it's nuts. Like, you would never guess that this is a BH Cosmetics palette. I don't know what they got going on at BH right now, but they are killing it with their eyeshadow palettes. So this one was at the top of my list. I'm like, when I think of winter, I would totally reach for this color story. And it's got the cool tones in there. It's got the grays, but it's got the pops of blue. Clearly, that's just what I like for the winter time. I also wanted to mention the Too Faced, the Chocolate Gold palette. I just think this screams holiday to me. It's not like an overly holiday palette, but it's got like the pop of green in there, but you've got all the metallics. This is a great palette. This was one of my favorite palettes that Too Faced has ever done because the metallics in this are so nice, but the green is what really just, it just jumps out to me for holiday, but I feel like the color story in general it's really flexible for the time of the year because it is very neutral. But you've got the pop of silver, the gold, you got the purples, the pinks, so you got like the party time shades. I just think this is a really great palette for all year, quite honestly, but I would definitely reach for this in the wintertime. Not at the top of my list for my favorite palette of winter, but I would consider this to be like a favorite palette for winter. My next palette is another new one. This is the Lunar Beauty Eternal Eclipse. I mean, you guys are seeing a common theme, I feel like, at this point. I like the blues, I like the silvers. That's just my vibe for the wintertime. But this palette, I feel like is just so unique, especially the shade Meteor. It's like a lavender silver. Oh, it's so incredibly pretty. All the looks that I've done with this palette I think are so stunning, and it just gives me the cool vibes. I like cool tones, don't come for me. And then the packaging on this is incredible. I love the formula of Lunar Beauty eyeshadows, one of my favorite brands of all time when it comes to makeup products. And I also want to mention the Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry Palette. Again, another cool tone palette, but you know what? Don't fucking judge me for it. I think this is a really great cool tone palette though. I like the fact that it has that pop of coral because I think it gives you just the ability to take your look to another level when you have a bunch of cool tones. It just almost gives you a way to add a little bit of warmth to your look, and I really do enjoy that about this palette. I feel like this is a really well-rounded cool tone palette, especially if you're really not experienced a lot with cool tones. I think this is a great stepping stone. And then when talking about cool tone palettes, I have to mention also the Glam Palette from Natasha Denona because I love Natasha Denona formula. And then this palette, I'm like, okay, it's a cool tone palette. There's nothing particularly special about it, but the formula is incredible. And I love the shades that she has in here. I think they lean a lot more silver toned, which for wintertime, I'm all about that life. But I think this is a great palette for a great price point for a really phenomenal formula. Like I said about the Anastasia, I think that's a great like stepping stone into cool tones, but then I feel like with the Natasha Denona, the formula is what takes it to another level. So when you look at this palette, you're like, okay, there's nothing special about it at all. It's the formula of the Natasha Denona eyeshadows is what sells these palettes to me. And I love the color story. I think it's really like icy and silvery and just almost like grungy, but glamorous and just the cool tones. I love the cool tones. I think this is such a beautiful palette. So definitely at the top of my list for my winter palettes. And then everybody out there is going to hate my guts right now because if you don't have this palette, everybody and their mother still wants this palette in the worst way. And it's the Muerte palette. I think if I was to reach for any palette in the winter time, it would be this one because I love how it's got the navies in here. It's got the pops of reds, pops of like the teals and greens. I feel like this would be a great holiday palette as well. I think Melt did everybody such a disservice by not bringing this back, because this was such a good palette. And if you saw my recent Melt video, I'm usually not the biggest fan of Melt, but I feel like this palette, just something was so spectacular about it. And then the color story is just so insanely different from my collection. I love this palette. I will never get rid of this. I think it's so wonderful. And then my last and final palette is going to be the Scott Barnes Glamazon palette, because it's a cool tone dream and I love it, but you still have your pops of like warm tones in here, but I love how it's got the greens, it's got the purples, the silvers, the grays. You guys get it. I do have my critiques on this palette as far as like, I feel like the gold really throws off the way that this palette looks. I would have loved to have seen this as like a, almost like a metallic lavender or something like that, or even like a hollow theme. The gold I feel like really makes this color story not look the best. I think if he chose like a silver, it would have looked so much better, but the formula of these eyeshadows is incredible. Like I always say about Scott Barnes, I love the quality of his products. It's just the packaging misses the mark for me, but for the quality that I feel like I'm getting with his eyeshadows, I feel like it is worth it to get his palettes at like a discounted price. I know he just had like 30% off of his website, but this palette, I'm really glad that I own it, and I love how it's got the pop of blue in here as well. It's just a beautiful palette. I could see myself reaching for this a ton in the wintertime. I mean, I've only got 2 eyeballs, and I have all these palettes, so which ones I'll actually get to use, I'm not really sure yet. But I guess you'll all see throughout the month of December, because we're uploading every single day. So I hope you guys did enjoy all of these palettes. Let me know in the comments down below which palettes are your favorite for the winter months, or if you don't care, or if you're like, let me live my best life, I'm going to wear just a tropical sunrise on my eyeballs. Let me know what you guys think. And don't forget to go subscribe to my girl Katie Murrh. She's such a gem, guys. If you guys haven't checked her out yet, please make sure you go check her out. Her channel is just wonderful. She's a gem. I love and adore Katie. So thank you again, Katie, for collabing with me, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!